Blog Talk Radio.
We interrupt this broadcast for an emergency announcement. A massive earthquake. The flood has reached. All roads into and out of are closed. No medical services. Store shelves have been stripped.
What's coming? Are you ready? You are at the right place to hear the best ways to stay safe and weather the coming storm. Welcome to Power Preppers. Here is your host, Patricia Baker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Power Preppers. I am your host, Patricia Baker, and my mission is to make getting prepared for any emergency easy and efficient. So get informed and get prepared. And please remember to sign up for our newsletter at supernaturalgirls.com for all the latest show information, and we have discounts on products there. We're going to be doing even more giveaways on both Power Preppers and Supernatural Girls Radio. So take a look over there. Again, it's supernaturalgirls.com, and make sure you are signed up so that you can get some of this great free stuff, and you can participate with any of the discounts you want on the health products that we are offering for you. This Saturday night, my co-host, Becky Andreasen, and me will be speaking with author Gerard Medvac about the Mid-Atlantic UFO cover-up. Now, you may not know this because it was not at all covered by the mainstream media. There were 1,729 reported UFO sightings in 1 year in the Mid-Atlantic area of the country. Now, this amounts to about 5 UFO sightings a day, and those are the only ones that were reported. There were probably many more that nobody even picked up a phone to talk about. So we'd like to know what's going on and why this was covered up, and we will be speaking with Gerard Medvac on Saturday night. So join us this Saturday and every Saturday night, 9 to 11 Eastern Time. Now, today, we have a very special guest. He's one of our favorite guests. We've had him on Supernatural Girls before, and he is terrific. He's a wealth of information about herbs, and he's a clinical herbalist, and he's involved in many different wonderful projects in Vermont and across the country. And his name is Guido Mase. He is the author of a terrific book called The Wild Medicine Solution. And that book is available on Amazon.com, and everybody should buy a copy and keep it handy so that you know what herbs to have in your prepper pantry and what herbs you need to have in your medicine cabinet. So let's welcome Guido. Guido, you are live on the air with Power Preppers.
Hi, Patricia. Thanks a lot for having me on. It's great to be here.
It is my pleasure. You are truly one of our very favorite guests, and thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy day to speak with us about the magic of herbs and what we need to know in all different times, daily life as well as storing for emergency situations.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of herbal medicine is that the plants are out there for us. And really with just a little bit of know-how, they're not difficult to prepare. And once you learn to identify them or grow them, you have this sort of ready access to some pretty powerful and pretty effective medicine when we really looked at it with clinical and pharmacological research. So herbs are really good stuff and are a great sort of technology of independence for being able to reclaim a little control over your own health care.
Well, I want sovereignty with my health. That's how I feel. And I, quite frankly, have gotten very little relief from using pharmaceuticals for different issues I've had throughout the years. And when I've turned to herbs, I have found them to be much more effective. And, of course, then there are no side effects for the most part. And it's been a wonderful transition for me. And I urge everybody to consider this as a good alternative. Because, like you said, there's just so much they have to offer us. And they're whole. They're very much simpatico with us, right?
That's one of the neatest things that I've uncovered is exactly that, that they do have sort of an affinity to us that isn't some kind of magical coincidence. It's more born, I think, of the fact that we grew up in the same ecosystem and in the same environment. Human beings are animals, of course, and as animals, we've been eating these plants forever. A lot of our physiologic systems are keyed and attuned to having these plant signals, these plant chemicals on a daily basis. I really think a big part of why we see a lot of the chronic diseases of the Western world, and diabetes and heart disease, is partly because we miss these plants and they're not with us on a daily basis. But beyond that, I think herbal medicine is also really excellent at dealing with more sort of acute or scary situations, situations like infections, wounds, respiratory illnesses. And it would probably be smart for us to think at least about using herbs first, because they do tend to leave much less of a footprint on the human being when you compare them, say, to an antibiotic. We're really recognizing how important the beneficial bacteria that live inside us and around us are for our well-being, for maintaining our immunity, for helping us to resist these new superbugs. And herbal medicine doesn't wreak havoc on our good gut bugs, on our microflora, the way antibiotics do. Now, don't get me wrong, technological medicine and antibiotic drugs are really important, but we do overuse them, and it's interesting to me to note that the technological medicine world is also recognizing this, right? That
yes,
the
finally, they're coming to agree with us on that it has been overused, and now these bugs are now immune in some ways to some of these medications.
Well, we've created them ourselves, unfortunately, by really, overdoing it with the antibiotics for things like childhood ear infections. So you're not only kind of helping yourself by growing some of these plants or learning to identify them in the woods so that you can help with infections in yourself and in your family, but you're also helping everybody and helping medicine as a whole when you decrease your reliance on antibiotics and you don't kind of use the sledgehammer for the mosquito is how we like to describe it.
Exactly, because I know you said that a lot about, in this conversation and in other conversations we've had, you've talked about gut flora and how important that is for that to be in balance. And certainly when you take an antibiotic, it just wipes everything out, not just the one pathogen you're trying to get rid of, but everything. And then you look at how antibiotics were given out like candy 30, 40 years ago. And now what we have is a huge increase in chronic illness like autoimmune disease. And you can't help but wonder, are these things related? And is our gut flora so out of balance and has been so wiped out by earlier antibiotic use that it set the stage for this?
I think you're right. I can't help but wonder either. The bottom line fact is we just know so very little about it. And I think physicians and technological medicine are beginning to recognize that the indiscriminate sort of wiping out or tinkering with this microflora or using substances that don't really take the microbiome into consideration may be doing things that we really did not expect or foresee, or at the very least things that we don't fully understand. And that's a place where herbal medicine has a much, much gentler impact on our good gut bugs, while at the same time being able to really address pathogens. When you look at, a plant like the root of barberry, which is actually a kind of an invasive shrub that we should be harvesting more of out of the forest, it has a great impact on some pathogenic strains of E. coli, on staph bacteria, on strep bacteria, but it doesn't really hurt the beneficial gut flora like lactobacilli or bifidobacteria that are in our GI tract. Part of the reason for that might be that we've been eating stuff like barberry for a really long time, and we may have evolved a gut flora that pathogens really can't. So with herbal medicine, we kind of turn back the clock on this antibiotic resistance, and I'm telling you, we're going to need it more and more, not just in emergency situations, but also as adjuncts to conventional medicine as we start to see more antibiotics fail.
I agree. I think it's getting very dicey out there for people that have some of these serious infections and they can't seem to get over them. And one antibiotic leads to a problem with other issues later on. So, you can take these antibiotics, but then you can end up with thrush, or you can end up with candida, or you can end up with something else. So one breeds another. It may solve one problem, but it breeds another. And so I agree with you. But now barberry bark sounds very interesting. Is that something that can be harvested at any time of year or only certain times of year?
It's a root, so we tend to prefer to take roots in the spring or fall, so as to not interfere too much with the photosynthesis of the plant when it's trying to make energy for itself and grow and thrive. But really, if you're in a pinch, barberry is a really resilient shrub, and wildlife conservationists might argue too resilient, and then it's invading some native plant territory. So if you have barberry or you're growing barberry, harvesting it almost any time of year will work, especially if you need it in a pinch.
So you're talking about taking the root then, and then what do you do with the root? Do you pulverize it and then make a tea out of it?
Yeah. Well, if you harvest barberry root, it's probably about the thickness of a Sharpie permanent marker, and it's very hard. It runs underground, a few inches under the ground, kind of parallel to the surface of the ground, so you can find it pretty quickly, but getting it off the plant is tough. So I suggest using some clippers. If you have clippers, you can usually clip a pretty good section of the root, rhizome really, from the underground material that you find connected to the barberry shrub. And then that stuff is pretty rock hard. So there's a few things you can do. If you have a hammer mill or something that can really pulverize things well, or even a Vitamix, but those types of things may not work with electricity, you can pulverize it. And if you get a powder of barberry, that can be used topically for wounds. It can be used as a mouthwash for gum disease. It can be used internally at doses of about a quarter teaspoon 2 or 3 times a day. But if you have access to some alcohol, even 80-proof vodka, you can take the roots and kind of pound them with a hammer to kind of soften them and loosen the material, and just put them in a jar and cover them with vodka. And what you then have is a very simple crude extract. After about 3-4 weeks of steeping, that can be used internally for infections. And if it's in the first 24 hours of a wound, it can be used topically as well, although, alcohol will burn in a wound.
Right. Not very pleasant.
No, and you don't want to do it after the first day because it'll actually inhibit the repair and growth of new healthy tissue.
Okay, so for applying it topically, you want to wait a couple of days and then put it on.
Well, or you just use it right away as a disinfectant, and then you stop using it. If you want to continue using it, using the powder is probably a better choice because it's the alcohol that's keeping the wound.
That's the irritant. Yeah, that's the irritant. I see. Well, again, this is a wonderful root to keep on hand then also in the prepper pantry as well as around for daily use. And since we're on the topic of infections and things like that, what other top herbs would you recommend that people keep on hand and store to handle an infection situation?
Yeah, to keep it super simple, I really just think there's 2. One is the herb yarrow. And yarrow is amazing. It's a flower that's very easy to grow, or even easy to identify. It grows wild in meadows. A beautiful white flower. And you can take that and dry it and grind it into a powder. There's nothing like it, short of maybe cayenne powder, for stopping bleeding.
Oh.
And it also is an incredible disinfectant. So for any type of cut, even if it's a very deep cut, cut to the bone even, yarrow will be able to help control bleeding and disinfect. Countless times I have just taken yarrow, chewed it up, and put it in my wound, or asked others to chew it and put it in their wounds, deep into that wound. And the bleeding stops, and then we don't even try to remove the yarrow. We just leave it in there. And never have I seen an infection develop from that. It's incredibly antiseptic material. So it kills pretty much everything that could cause an abscess to form or make that infection get out of control.
Now, yarrow powder, would that work as well as the root?
You use the top. You don't use the root with yarrow. So you powder the leaf and flower, yes. Or you can just take the whole plant and dry it. And then once it's dry, it powders really readily. So you can just have it on hand and store it whole and powder a little bit on an as-needed basis. But I have a little bit of yarrow powder in my first. I take it on all hikes just in case I hurt myself or run into someone who's gotten hurt. And it's also something that's great to keep in the kitchen, where I think a lot of domestic cuts take place.
Oh, the kitchen is a very dangerous place, yes.
I know.
So that
yarrow
is a good place
further,
to keep
though.
it on hand.
It has a lot of other properties, too, that's why I really put it right at the top of the list in terms of herbs that we should get to know, because it can really help break a fever and control temperature when prepared as a tea. And so you do about 1 heaping tablespoonful of yarrow per cup of hot water, and you would repeat that every 2, 3, 4 hours, maybe sweetened with a little bit of honey or maple syrup. Excellent at breaking the fever, at opening the circulation.
Wow,
so
and that's very important because, and especially if there's no medical care available, if you're out camping or if there has been an emergency situation and you can't get to medical care and a child or an adult starts to run a high fever, that is a wonderful remedy to know about and to have on hand.
That's right. It's also a good bitter, so it helps soothe and improve symptoms in the stomach and intestines and the gut. So if you feel, upset stomach or you're having heartburn or just bloating and symptoms of indigestion and discomfort, yarrow can help with that too. So it's always one of my top herbs in the medicine cabinet, first and foremost for its ability to stop bleeding and treat infections from wounds, but then also because it's great for fevers and for the belly too.
Wow, well, it's all around, like you said. It does sound like it's something that you shouldn't, and no one should be without. I'm going to go buy some. That is a really important one, and I don't have that one. It's one of the few I don't have, but now I'm going to get that one too.
Well,
and what's the second one that you would recommend?
Yeah,
you said there were 2 top ones.
Which in Europe, I grew up in Italy, and this herb would be, and I mean, it's almost a food, but it's a very strong plant. It's considered a medicine chest in and of itself, and that's garlic. Garlic is really easy to grow. If you take a head of garlic and you break it up into cloves, you don't even have to peel them. You just plant them scar side down, about an inch underground. The one thing that garlic likes is a lot of fertility. So if you have, some good cow manure or some good compost that you can add to your soil or to your pot, if you're planting it in a window box or in a terrace garden.
Now, garlic needs to be planted in the fall, though, right?
You ideally would plant it right about now, or second half of November, let's say. But you can get away with planting it in the spring, especially if you have an early spring. If your ground is soft by March or even early April, you can get garlic cloves in the ground and you'll get a good harvest by late July.
Wow, that's a surprise. I've always planted my garlic in the fall and have had tremendous luck with it. It seems to like whatever I'm doing. And I get huge garlic cloves that stay with me all winter until they last all the way through April, which is without starting to sprout again, which is great. But I've heard that when you plant it in the spring, you end up with a weak kind of a plant. But you're saying if you plant it early enough, then it's a strong plant.
It won't make as big of a head because it hasn't had the time to kind of set roots in the fall. Because the garlic that you plant now, it really gets to get a jump on the growing season when the thaw comes in spring. But you'll still get a nice head of garlic even if you plant it in, late March. Here in Vermont, that's a little hard to do because we often have a foot of snow still in late March. So.
Yeah, up far north where you are, you do. And, with garlic, there's so many uses. Tell us a little bit about what we can use it for.
So, in Italy, if anyone got cut out in the field or in the kitchen, the first thing folks would do is they crush a clove of garlic and just put it right on there. It is not as nice as the yarrow. It definitely stings a little because it has that kind of oily quality to it, And if you put just straight garlic oil in your mouth, it feels a little bit irritating. So it stings when you apply it to a wound, but, man, it kills everything from bacteria across a broad spectrum to viruses as well, and also fungus. So we were talking about thrush, which is a yeast infection, basically, a candidiasis. Garlic is excellent against candida, and it's also excellent against intestinal parasites, worms and helminths, also amoebas that you might find in things like Giardia. So garlic is excellent at controlling and killing pathogens. and it's fairly easy to grow and obtain, and also not too hard to take. If you're going to use garlic internally for a systemic infection like yeast infection or for a respiratory tract virus, it's really excellent for bronchial viruses or lung bacteria, for sinus infections, or even just a common cold. What you want to do is crush or chop the garlic clove and let it sit for about 5 minutes in the open air. And the antiseptic compounds, which are sulfur-rich compounds like allicin in garlic, need to come into contact with an enzyme that's in another compartment of the garlic clove in order to become active. And you have to break the garlic in order to do that. We really think
that's important.
The garlic's trying to protect itself against getting eaten by little mice under the ground in the winter, so that when its skin is broken and the clove is pierced, that's when the pungent compounds are released, right? And those pungent compounds are the ones that do the antiseptic action. So, yeah, chop it, let it sit for at least 5 minutes, and then take it as close to raw as possible. Garlic is excellent for the heart, for blood pressure, for high cholesterol, for preventing cardiovascular disease. And you can cook it or roast it and still get those benefits. But if you're after the antimicrobial, antifungal, antiviral quality, you really need to try and take it as close to that just fresh chopped state as possible. This can be hard to do.
Because it has that strong taste, and certainly that odor stays with you throughout the day and night. But at one time, I got this bright idea that I should make garlic juice. And so I got a full head of garlic and juiced it, and I added carrot and tomato, and I gave a glass to my husband, and I drank some, and I thought I was going to die. I mean, it was just, I overdid it. You know, I took too much, and I'm sure it killed whatever was in me. It got rid of it, but it also was a little too strong for me. But it was a funny experience. We look back on it and laugh at our adventures in juicing. But certainly I have to tell you that once that initial discomfort went away, which it didn't stay with us very long. It was like 20 minutes. We both had to kind of sit down. But after that, I mean, we both felt the difference in our energy, and I think we were both on the edge of a cold that it never developed. So the garlic, I'm sure, was the thing that did it. But I just didn't need to make as much of that as I did.
Especially a whole head, it sounds like a lot. Typically for a cold or for a relatively mild infection, we would suggest one clove. And, of course, cloves vary in size. So a moderately sized clove of garlic chopped up 3 times a day maybe at most. You might be able to get away with twice a day. And one of the easiest ways I've found to take it is to chop it up and then mix it with a little bit of honey. And the honey really does help it go down a little bit, and it also seems to counteract that feeling of maybe burning that you feel in your stomach after putting down half a head of garlic juice.
Yeah,
which,
wow, burning.
I can't imagine what that felt like.
Oh, it was really something I'll never forget. But, yes, now that I know these things, the honey is something that I would definitely want to use with it. And, yeah, I mean, I love garlic. I know a lot of people love garlic, but we are kind of trained to cook everything. And certainly the enzymes and the healing properties that you're mentioning that are in garlic, I would imagine it makes perfect sense. You're going to get more out of it if it is raw.
For the antibacterial effect, that is indeed the case. And part of the thing is that, you know, it burns, and that's what is part of its anti-pathogenic action. But it's still useful for the heart and for the cardiovascular system, even if it's cooked or roasted, which is another great advantage of garlic, is it's a great heart protector as well.
Well, it sounds like it's something everybody, again, should have. Yarrow and then garlic. These are things, and also garlic stores pretty well, so we can keep that in our prepper pantry as well as use it just daily. And again, this is something we've discussed a lot on this show, Guido, is so many people think that when there's an emergency, they'll just hunker down and they'll be fine. But what they're forgetting is if they're starting out unwell, it's just going to get worse from there. So the key is to start out as healthy as you possibly can. So eating garlic now and using bitters in your daily diet, which you've mentioned before is so healthy. These are just some of the things that everybody needs to think about incorporating today, so that if there is a big emergency, then they're starting out ahead of the curve with a real strong constitution and good health.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, Patricia. And I mean, that's a big mission of mine, is to get more of these medicinal plants, especially the gentle tonic ones, into people on an ongoing basis. And just to use the example of bitters that you brought up, if you are taking bitters on a daily basis, the state of your GI tract is going to not only feel a lot better from a symptom perspective, but you also are going to enhance and nourish the right conditions to make sure that the gut microbiome is as happy as it could be, that your secretions are really good. And this will really help with things like enteric infection or food poisoning. Basically, it's going to be a lot harder for bad bugs to gain a foothold in a healthy situation. And this is something that even Pasteur, when he was trying to develop the germ theory of disease, recognized that it was important to have a healthy field as much as it was to try and eliminate the bad bug, so to speak.
Well, it makes sense, and I'm sure we all know people that never get anything, never get the bad bugs, and yet there are some people who seem to get these types of problems all the time. So, yeah, it does make sense what you're saying with the use of bitters and the things that encourage the proper balance of probiotics on a daily basis to work
right
alongside that.
Right. And, while we're talking about fighting off infection, just one sort of idea that I'd put in your listeners' ears is the idea of getting to know some good local mushrooms. Almost all mushrooms are medicinal to a certain extent. Many of them contain appreciable quantities of vitamin D, especially if they're dried in the sun. But they have a lot of immune-active sugar chains in them that, when consumed on a regular basis, really do a lot to help strengthen our resistance to bugs and make the use of something like garlic to treat infection much less necessary, because you're just a whole lot stronger on a daily basis. Of course, it's always good to have that garlic on hand if you need it, but if you strengthen yourself with maitake mushrooms or reishi mushrooms or even just regular oyster mushrooms that you might find in the forest, you'll be a lot better off on a daily basis.
Now, with mushrooms like that, do you also recommend eating them raw, or are mushrooms meant to be cooked? How can you use those, the wild ones especially?
Now, mushrooms are tricky. They live in an environment, and this is maybe part of why they're good for us, where they're having to compete against bacteria in the soil, algae, all sorts of other things that might try and invade their nutrient absorption sphere. So they make it very difficult to be digested by secreting a range of substances and having a strong, tightened cell wall that basically makes it hard for them to be broken down. It's a protection strategy. So you're right. Mushrooms should be dried or processed with heat, which basically means cooking. You can saute them if they're edible and are tasty that way, or you can simmer them into stock, and that can be done fresh or dry because the heat accomplishes the sort of liberation of the mushroom's constituents. But either heating them or drying them or both before eating them, in general, is a good rule for being able to maximize how much you get out of mushrooms. If you take a shiitake mushroom and you just eat it whole raw, you're probably going to just be eliminating most of that mushroom undigested.
Ooh, and yes, that's not what you want.
Right.
Okay, so cooking is a good thing when it comes to mushrooms, so that's good to know. And I want to talk more about these bitters because I know you're involved with a company that makes them. I actually tried some of them, and I found them to be delightful to use on a daily basis, and it has made a big difference for me. I've suffered from digestive issues for most of my life, so when you talked about those bitters, I was very intrigued, and I wanted to try them. So we're going to take a short commercial break here, Guido. Everybody stay with us. If you have a question for Guido, you can call 646-478-0828, or you can type it in the chat room, and I'll be happy to ask that question for you. And stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Bonjour, this is Veronique Raskin, founder of the Organic Wine Company. As one of the pioneers of the organic wine movement, since 1980, I have brought you the very best and most authentic organic wines directly to your table. I work with small family estates who grow certified organic grapes and produce exceptional wines. You can purchase our wines individually from our website at theorganicwinecompany.com or join one of our wine clubs. Our organic wines are perfect for you and for your family as gifts for friends and relatives, and they are simply spectacular for the holidays. Visit us at theorganicwinecompany.com to enjoy the very best organic wines conveniently delivered to your door. I am Veronique Raskin, passionate about my mission. I offer to you vegan, organic, and biodynamic wines, wines made by people of the heart, wines with a heart. Au revoir. Call us at 1-888-ECO-WINE.
Are you ready for a new experience of freedom and powerful connection? Would you like a positive, effortless change in your life? Then come to CosmicFusion.com, where we offer the most advanced energy clearing and expansion techniques in the world, with a quantum vortex energy to activate your divine blueprint and life's purpose. When your soul leads the way with cosmic fusion and quantum vortex energy, you can break clear of past difficulties and blocks with the power of the source. With Cosmic Fusion, the source energy does the work for you. It's easy and effortless. Listen to our free meditation right from our Cosmic Fusion website, the Cosmic Code Meditation. Sign up for one of our interactive webinars today. Come to Cosmic Fusion, www.cosmicfusion.com, to experience an effortless awakening and transformation. Are you ready for an upgrade? Are you ready for a new experience of living in the fifth dimensional magic and powerful connection? Then visit CosmicFusion.com today. CosmicFusion.com.
Your property tax bill. Have you seen it lately? It's frightening. Your property taxes are going up while your home value is going down. It's time to fight back and win. For the real truth about the property tax system, get attorney Pat Quintilian's book, Are You Getting Screwed on Your Property Taxes? How to Find Out and How to Fix It. Attorney Quintilian answers all your questions and gives you the facts you need to fight a property tax bill that is spiraling out of control. You'll also read about what happens to property owners who don't check their property records, only to find out too late they're taxed on square footage, fixtures, and even buildings that they don't own. Is this happening to you? Learn your rights. Buy attorney Pat Quintilian's book today. Are You Getting Screwed on Your Property Taxes? How to Find Out and How to Fix It. Available on Amazon.com.
Welcome back, everybody. We are speaking with Guido Mase, who is the author of a great book called The Wild Medicine Solution. That book is available on Amazon.com. And Guido, we were going to start talking more about bitters, but before we go there, I've got a couple questions that people wrote in. One is, what is a good plant for people to use when they are trying to stop smoking?
Well, I'm pleased to say that there's a few different plants that I've used or recommended for folks who are trying to quit tobacco. And these plants fall into two categories. One, the first is to kind of help support lung function, to help support the clearing of mucus and the restoration of good lung function, because tobacco kind of puts the lungs to sleep, especially the lung self-cleaning mechanism, which is part of why it's so harmful. And I would really put mullein at the top of the list for that. It's really safe, it's very gentle, and the leaves of the mullein plant can be brewed into tea to just help encourage and support good lung function. Another plant that I put up there is, it sounds like a plant, it's a lichen, and it's called Usnea.
How do you spell that?
Yeah, Usnea, Usnea. And it's one of these silvery green lichens that hangs off of tree branches in the forest. Of course, learn to make a good identification, but it's not a huge deal because none of these lichens, especially here in this Western Hemisphere, are poisonous to us when they grow on tree branches. But still, Usnea is excellent for a couple of reasons. One is it enhances the immune system's responsiveness to infection, and 2, it's actually antibiotic as well. We use it for bronchitis, for lung infections, but also for urinary tract infections. And when working with folks who are quitting tobacco, what I often notice is that they'll get sick as they're trying to quit, as they're cutting tobacco out. And that can be really frustrating and just make them feel rotten. So having mullein to soothe and improve lung function, and usnea to help really juice the immune system and counteract any invaders that might take advantage of the lung tissue in a smoker who's trying to quit are right up there, I think, in terms of support. But there is this one plant that actually grows wild in North America and is native to North America called lobelia. And there's a lot of different lobelias, some of which you'll find, at the nursery and garden baskets. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking particularly about lobelia inflata, which is inflata. It's a short plant. It never really gets much more than 10 inches tall, and it is pretty easy to grow from seed. So if you can get some lobelia seed from places like horizonherbs.com, you can grow it pretty easily. And the leaves of this plant contain an alkaloid that's called lobeline, which interestingly finds its way into the same receptor sites that are stimulated by nicotine.
Oh my!
But is non-addictive.
Huh.
Which is just fascinating, right? The other advantage, and we usually recommend lobelia in 2 forms, either as an alcohol-based extract, like we were talking about before, where you take a lot of lobelia leaves and you chop them and you barely cover them with vodka.
Right.
You let that sit for 3 or 4 weeks and then you strain it. If you make that kind of a preparation, 5 to 10 drops of it to start, not very much. If you take too much lobelia, think about what might happen if you try and eat tobacco, and swallow it. You get nauseous. You probably, might feel like you're going to throw up. Not good. And the same thing can happen from lobelia if you take too much of it. So tiny doses of it, or most often what I recommend is that folks smoke the lobelia leaf.
Oh, my.
It's really safe to smoke. And what happens is that if you smoke even, a few puffs of lobelia, and then you try and smoke a cigarette of tobacco, you will feel nauseous from the tobacco.
Oh, my goodness. So it's like a kind of a way of training yourself out of it and having a negative result. Well, that's fantastic.
And also because the lobelia hits those same receptors that are stimulated by nicotine, but it does it non-addictively, it's an amazing way to get over that craving, right? And what I always tell folks is cravings are always temporary. If you can find a way to, get through the craving, 5-10 minutes later it will be gone. So that can be done with, again, 5 to 10 drops of the liquid extract of lobelia, or by just smoking a little bit of it. And
now, when you talk about smoking this, are you talking about like rolling it up in some type of a cigarette-style paper or something, or just smoking the leaf in a way that, explain that to our audience. How can they do this?
I think that if you have the skill to be able to roll plant material into a cigarette-like device, that would work fine, but that's tough to do, and not everyone knows how to do it. So really just putting a pinch of lobelia leaf into a very simple pipe, like a corncob pipe or something like that, works great. And then you can control the amount you take. And really just 1 or 2 puffs is usually more than enough to get over a craving for tobacco. It's a lot less smoke than smoking an entire cigarette. And crucially, it stimulates the lungs to clean themselves rather than putting them to sleep the way tobacco does. And it is non-addictive. So you need less and less of it over time, and it's a great alternative to these sort of, electronic cigarettes or nicotine replacement patches, which really keep you hooked on the chemical, right?
Yes.
The alkaloid lobeline is different in the way it works and actually helps break the addictive cycle.
What a wonderful trio of herbs to help somebody stop smoking. That's terrific.
Yeah, lobelia is amazing stuff. Just use it judiciously because too much, especially of the liquid internally, can make you feel a little nauseous. But we use it for all manner of lung stuff, especially asthma, where it can really help relax and open airways in an asthmatic person, especially when taken, ongoingly.
Well, that's a good thing to know because so many people today have asthma. And again, I'm always saying, okay, what if you can't get to the drugstore to get your inhaler? What are you going to do? So here's an alternative. It's using lobelia.
Yep. And, the old-timers in Appalachia would smoke mullein or smoke lobelia for an emergency airway opening strategy for asthma. And it does work, although I don't usually recommend smoking something when you're having an asthma attack.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds counterproductive, but in a way it's okay because it gets it in there. It gets the herb property in there to do its job.
That's right, and it gets it quick.
Yes. Now, we have mullein here on the property, grows wild, and I've noticed there's little prickly hairs on it. When you make a tea out of that, is there any way to deal with that, or do you just leave it and just make sure you strain it really well?
You can strain it really well, and that does fine. Yeah, I've never really run into a problem. You mean in terms of like irritation of the mouth or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
I've not really seen that be an issue with mullein. Use if you're really concerned about that, you can always strain it through a coffee filter or a piece of clean muslin cloth, and that will catch any kind of particulate matter that might be irritating. But, again, with mullein leaf, it's a couple of heaping tablespoons of chopped mullein leaf per cup, 8 to 12 ounces of hot water. You let that steep for about 10 minutes, strain it, and drink it. Okay.
Well, that sounds like something that could be easily done, especially in the Northeast where it does grow wild. I see it all over the place, not just here on our property, but everywhere. So that's great. Now, I do have another question. Somebody wrote in about golden seal as something to keep on hand for an infection. What are your thoughts on golden seal?
Golden seal is very similar to the plant we talked about, barberry, in terms of its ability to handle a range of different pathogens, really good for topical wounds and killing things that might get into your skin through a cut, and also good for food poisoning, good for fungal infections. The reason I usually, it's stronger than barberry. The reason I usually am wary of just coming straight out with golden seal is that it's a very endangered plant. There's not a lot of it in the forest in its native environment anymore. Oh. And so I tend to use it for very, very specific situations. People who have repeated, intractable chronic sinus infections, for instance, where the tissue has just lost its integrity and they're getting infection after infection after infection, and this can be in the GI tracts too. And I'll start with barberry if a person is not that far gone because it's, again, kind of golden seal light. It has a lot of the similar qualities, but isn't quite as good of a tissue tonic as golden seal is. That said, golden seal is fantastic, and if you can find an organically grown source of golden seal root powder or golden seal liquid extract, or if you can grow it yourself, it requires shade, but it does grow in a forest environment, then it's an amazing and incredible plant to have on hand. It's just that a lot of the golden seal out there has been kind of ripped out of the forest without attention to its long-term sustainability, and that's a concern for me. Yes, and for me as well, and that's really too bad that they've been doing this without any foresight, but I'm also one of the people who can testify to the power of golden seal. Now, when you talk about people that have recurrent nasal infections and sinus infections, are you talking about using golden seal kind of as a wash through the nasal passages or internally or both? It's actually both. Golden seal will get at a lot of the bugs that might be living in your nasal cavity and in your sinuses by making a tea and straining it thoroughly and then using something like a neti pot or, just kind of pouring it up your nose and letting it trickle through your sinuses. It's an interesting experience if you've never heard of it or never tried it, but it really is pretty fantastic. Neti is an Ayurvedic technique from the Indian subcontinent that employs various medicinal fluids up the nose for a range of different purposes. But if you know how to do that, that's a great way to use golden seal. But you don't necessarily even have to. And in fact, half the time, the bugs that are in a sinus infection are in these pockets where they're kind of sealed off, And that's part of why it applies so much pressure and why, all the head aches behind the eyes. And it's just really difficult for even water put up the nose to get at those areas. There's also not really good blood flow in those areas either, which is part of why antibiotics for sinus infection, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier, are now starting to be less and less used for sinus infections. And the physicians are starting to say that you probably shouldn't use antibiotics for sinus infections because they just aren't doing the trick quite so well.
No
so
kidding.
What Golden Seal does when you take it internally is it seems to work by reflex. All of the mucous membranes of the body, the mucous membranes in the GI tract, the mucous membranes in the lungs and in the sinuses, the nose, seem to all, because probably they come from the same embryologic tissue during development, seem to all share a common nervous system connection. So that if you apply an herb to one tissue, often by reflex, you get activity in a tissue that's far away. We see this a lot by using soothing herbs like marshmallow or corn silk for urinary inflammation, like cystitis. Those plants aren't getting to the urinary bladder, but because you soothe the GI tract, you're also soothing the urinary tissue. So similarly, when Golden Seal is taken internally, the effect that it has in the belly, which is very much a bitter effect and a tonic effect, also reflexes to the sinuses, and the sinus tissue reduces in swelling, right? And it becomes more astringed and more toned, and its secretions change. They become thinner and less thick. You put all that together, you allow the sinus to drain. And when you're allowing the sinus to drain, you're also letting oxygen in. And if there is one enemy to bacteria that cause sinus infections, it's oxygen. The reason that they cause infections is because that sinus ends up getting plugged, right?
Right.
And no air can get in there, and drainage can't leave, and so you basically have a little abscess in there. So if anything you can do to astringe that tissue, thin the secretions, and open the sinus passage will do wonders in terms of the infection. And then the idea is that the immune system takes over. These bugs aren't living in an area where there's a lot of sugar or a lot of blood flow. They're living in a place where there's really just basically a little bit of tissue and a little bit of mucus. The reason they thrive is because they get plugged, or the sinus gets plugged, and these bacteria are now in an anaerobic environment and can thrive. So Golden Seal, by astringing the tissue and thinning the secretions, really helps just let the body do its own thing against those bacteria and resolve the infection.
God, that's perfect. That's perfect. Well, there's another. I actually have a question for you before we go back to bitters, and that is about spruce berries. Have you heard about the use of spruce berries for the symptoms of Lyme disease?
That's not one that I've heard of yet, and as far as I know, and I wonder if we're talking about the same thing, but as far as I know, the spruce tree doesn't make a berry. It makes more of a pine cone type thing.
There's like a red spruce berry. Actually, how I heard about it is from one of our guests who was on the show, Evan Pritchard, who's a Micmac Native American. And he actually had Lyme disease and was talking about how he used these red spruce berries, which are only available at a certain time of year. And I actually went online looking for this. I know so many people affected by Lyme and couldn't find a source for them anywhere. So I
wonder if he was talking about, a yew-type tree rather than a spruce, because those definitely have berries that have antimicrobial action to them that are red. So, that's the thing with common names. Sometimes we talk at cross purposes because we may not be talking about the same plant.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be curious to talk more with Mr. Pritchard about where these berries were found and what time of year and what the species looked like.
I'm going to put you two in contact. Yes. I'll put you two in contact, and then I'll report back to everybody about what this is and if it is something that's available, because, again, there's so many people affected by Lyme, and there really aren't a lot of good treatments out there. In traditional medicine, there's next to nothing. So I was very intrigued when he brought that up, but it did sound like something where you really needed to know the time of year where you could source these. And he said, I don't want to encourage people to start cutting down these spruce trees, certainly, but to get the berries.
Right.
But nobody wants to see that. And, we want to see these things continue to flourish and then be able to use certain parts of it for medicine. So anyway, so this is great. Well, we've started a mystery here. We're going to get to the bottom of it. And let's get back to bitters, because that is such an important topic.
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of systematically removed the bitter flavor from our diets over the last couple hundred years because it just doesn't taste good, you know. But all the traditional cultures and traditional systems of cuisine, including, you know, Italy, where I grew up, are very big on bitters and on experiencing a little bit of this bitter flavor. What the bitter flavor seems to do, and you notice this right away when you taste it on your tongue, you get a little more saliva, your mouth gets juicier. That's echoed through the GI tract, you know, and actually tasting it is really important. And you get, bottom line, really improved digestive function across the board. So all of these folks who are taking antacid medications, whether they be over-the-counter or prescription or sometimes both, bitters are amazing for heartburn, and taken after meals can really provide relief and help get you off of these drugs. But the first question that I usually get is, what do you mean by a bitter? And really the answer is pretty simple. It's just a plant that has a bitter flavor to it. And we have mild bitters, like the common dandelion root, which is an excellent tonic for any type of digestive symptoms, all the way to stronger, more intensely bitter plants, like barberry, for instance, barberry root that we talked about, or the root of gentian, which is found in Europe in the Alps. And the effects are generally the same. Improved secretion of digestive enzymes, improved secretion of bile from the liver, much less symptoms in the GI tract, from heartburn to bloating to indigestion to symptoms that people might call irritable bowel syndrome. All of these are improved by bitters. But
there's a lot of people that have that now, Crohn's and irritable bowel and whatever you want to call it. I think there's just so many intestinal disturbances today. And here's something simple that people can try.
Exactly. And I sometimes wonder if the prevalence of gut complaints is really a bitter deficiency disease rather than, you know, whatever you want to call it.
Well, it could be, because didn't you also say last time you were on the show about the fact that bitters stimulate the liver, and that if you don't stimulate the liver, it just kind of sits around and isn't doing anything. So
that's
the liver is so
it.
important.
If you think about what we were eating even a couple hundred years ago, a lot of this stuff was pretty crude, pretty coarse, fairly wild, and didn't taste like cake flour, you know. It tasted, you know, if you just take wheat berries and grind them, there's certainly an element of bitterness to it. Even if you take carrots, I think we were talking about last time, and carrots always have a little bit of a bitter peel to them. Mm-hmm. So we've removed this flavor, and it's really not something that our body is used to having removed. And so not only does the gut secrete less enzymes and less of its digestive juices, leading to improper, incomplete digestion and all the distress that comes from that, but the liver stops working, just as you exactly said. And liver is probably the major detoxifying organ that our body has, and is essential to help us handle a range of potential insults, be they chemical insults or pathogenic insults, preservatives, plasticizers, and things that might cause inflammation or irritation or damage in our body. So if the liver is working well, you tend to see a lot less of that stuff persisting in the bloodstream and contributing to a range of inflammatory issues like heart disease and all the way to arthritis.
Right.
So bitters are used in Europe, and I use them to a certain extent in my clinic, not just for gut complaints, but also for symptoms of inflammation, like arthritis and allergies.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And very, very, very safe stuff, especially if you're talking about something like dandelion root. So one of the easiest ways is to, you know, get your dandelions pulled up in spring when they're at their bitterest, and chop them up and dry them. And you can roast those in a cast iron pan until you get a little bit of nutty aroma coming up from the pan. And if it's chopped finely enough, or if you grind them a little in a blender, you can brew them right in a drip coffee maker, or even in a French press.
Just like coffee. Oh, my.
Just exactly like coffee. Now, it's not going to be a stimulant the way coffee is, but it'll be a great bitter, digestive, and liver tonic. You can also, as usual, take those dandelion roots and chop them up and cover them in vodka in a mason jar and let them sit for 3 or 4 weeks, like some of the other plants we've talked about.
And then you have a tincture like you would with the other herbs.
Precisely.
That's great. I mean, again, all of these are plants that we normally just want to get rid of. We see them growing in our garden, and we just want to poison them and kill them off. But these are things that we need in our diet. So it makes sense to maybe harvest them rather than just poisoning them away, and that way you're getting the benefit in your health.
Absolutely you are. And especially when used consistently over time, they contribute to what you were talking about, that sort of state of wellness and state of resiliency that help keep you from even getting an infection to begin with, or getting weakened to begin with. You were talking about
Well, that's just it. You want to be, like we've discussed, in a great state of health. And then if something does go wrong around us in our environment, then we're starting in a good place rather than starting being sick and then having to wait for some medical care that may never come. So this way you start off healthy. You can stay healthy if you keep these types of things in your prepper pantry. Also, let me mention the name of the company that makes these bitters, because I tried them. They were excellent. Could you give the website out? It's Moonshine something, as I recall.
Yeah, the bitters and tonics company that I'm associated with is called Urban Moonshine. Urban, like, of a city, URBAN. So urbanmoonshine.com is where we make these bitter extracts, and they're really great.
They have wonderful ones. They have lemon and orange and maple even. I mean, I bought a whole bunch of them and tried them all. They were excellent. So That's something that people can try on their own, and then if they don't have the time to harvest these herbs and plants and make their own, then they can buy them from urbanmoonshine.com.
You got it, and it's been really taking off over the last couple of years, because I think people are recognizing what you said, that, you got to be well, and herbs help us get there on a daily basis, and they're also great tools for feeling out of sorts to get us back into balance.
They really are. I can testify to that. And now I do have another question. A lot of people talk to me about migraines. Do you have any suggestions for that?
It's difficult to provide a sort of general suggestion because there are so many different reasons for migraines. Some can be connected to substances that we've taken in from the environment. Others can be connected to stress or tension or travel. Still others can have a hormonal connection. Menstrual migraines, for instance, are not that uncommon. So really, as an herbalist, I focus on trying to prevent migraines rather than necessarily treating them when they happen. It's very difficult to treat them with herbs once they happen. But, from a general perspective, it seems that herbs like feverfew might be useful as migraine preventatives, another very bitter herb. And butterbur extract is another that has shown a lot of promising research to help prevent migraines. But again, I would recommend talking to someone more in depth about your individual case if you suffer from migraines. Right, because
you're saying it can come from so many different sources. Yes. It's certainly something's out of balance in a major way, but the question then is where it's coming from. And the last herb you mentioned again is butterbur. Is that Butterbur?
That's exactly it. Petacites is its Latin name. And you do have to get a butterbur extract that's specially processed, because that's what the clinical research looks at, but it also whole fresh butterbur is potentially damaging to the liver. So if you have liver disease, you can't use fresh butterbur. But this processed extract has those liver toxins removed from it. Okay,
and that leads me to probably the last question we're going to have time for today, comfrey. Now, comfrey used to be the thing to take years ago, and then all of a sudden there was a lot of research coming out saying that it was very damaging to the liver. So what's the latest on comfrey?
Yeah, we've explored this issue pretty thoroughly. And bottom line, comfrey in adults, pretty safe stuff to use, especially if you're only using it for a broken bone for 6 weeks, 8 weeks at a time. If you use it topically for skin stuff, perfectly safe. Fantastic herb to use for arthritis topically or for scrapes or non-deep wounds. But it's these alkaloids, the pyrrolizidine alkaloids, that are also found in butterbur that were of concern in comfrey. First off, it's unclear whether American comfrey that has the purple flowers even has any of these alkaloids in its leaf. The European comfrey does. We're still not 100% positive that the American comfrey has these alkaloids. So the jury's, I guess, still out on that. But you have to consume them for a long period of time in order to achieve toxicity. And it's very difficult to achieve that with the leaf. It's easier to get it with the root of European comfrey, but again, it would have to be months of consuming it daily in high quantities. People have been concerned about using it around pregnancy and during nursing because, the developing fetus or the newborn infant, their livers are a lot more sensitive than a grown-up's liver might be.
Right.
And I still am conservative in comfrey's use around there just because better safe than sorry, right?
Yes.
But I also know a range of women who took comfrey throughout their pregnancy, and no issue whatsoever came up. So I think that's partly because the American comfrey may not even have any of the toxicity that we're worried about with European comfrey.
Well, that's great to know.
Feel safe using it for short term. Feel safe to use it topically in anyone of any age. Maybe be careful with pregnancy, nursing, and small children.
Sure. Well, that's a great answer, and I've been wanting to ask you that for a long time, so I'm glad I remembered to bring that issue up, Guido. And I can't thank you enough again for taking your time to be with us today. And we're going to have you back because there's always more to discuss. So next time we'll have you on Supernatural Girls on a Saturday night sometime in January or February when your schedule allows for it. And again, everybody, please go to Amazon.com and buy Guido's book. It's an excellent book. It's filled with great information and the how-tos and even how to cook some of these things. So you want to get this book. It is called The Wild Medicine Solution. It is by Guido Mase, and his last name is spelled M-A-S-E. Guido, thank you so very much. This has been an educational hour for sure, and we can't wait to have you back, so thank you.
It was my pleasure, Patricia, and be well.
Okay, take care. And goodbye, everybody. We'll talk to you again next week at Power Preppers.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in next week for another terrific episode of Power Preppers with Patricia Baker.